Listening to this guy's funny videos. He only made this thing, but these are all funny. These are all funny. Okay, listening to Phantom.
A woman grabbed my wrist and said, "Stop, I sense a dark energy following you." I said, "That's not dark energy, that's my fart." She closed her eyes. "The spirits are telling me you've suffered a great loss." I said, "Yeah, $50 if I keep listening to you." She said, "I can feel it. You've been betrayed by someone close." I said, "Ma'am, you've known me for 9 seconds." She opened one eye. "The energy doesn't lie. For $50 I can cleanse it." I said, "For free I can walk away." She stepped in front of me. "Wait, I also see great wealth in your future." I said, "Weird. I see none in yours and you're the psychic." She got louder. "You're blocking your own blessings by not believing." I said, "You turned my fart into dark energy. I can't take you seriously." She said, "The spirits work in mysterious ways." I said, "So does your rent apparently, since you're doing this on a sidewalk." She pointed at me. "Mock me and the curse stays." I said, "Then lift it, right now, free of charge, go." Then a kid walking past said, "If she was really psychic, she'd have seen that coming." A woman grabbed my...
This was actually funny.
I was setting up at the squat rack when a guy in a tank top stepped in front of the mirror and said, "This spot's mine. Find another one." I said, "You've been posing here for 20 minutes. It's a squat rack, not a photo booth." He flexed. "I reserved it. I'm in a building phase." I said, "The only thing you're building is a relationship with yourself." He got louder. "Do you know how much I lift?" I said, "Clearly not enough to move out of the way." He pointed at his arms. "People pay to look like this." I said, "People pay to leave when you walk in. That's different." He said, "I've been coming here 3 years." I said, 3 years. "And the only thing that's grown is your ego and the sweat stain." He puffed up. "I could snap you in half." I said, "With what?" "You built a mansion on top of 2 chopsticks." Then a girl on the next machine said, "Can you lower your arm? It stinks." I was at the park with my nephew when a woman blocked the slide and said, "This playground is ours today. Find another one." I said, "Ma'am, it's a public park. There's a sign right there." She said, "We come here every day. That makes it ours." I said, "I go to the gym every day. They still won't let me live there." She waved her hand. "My son needs space to play. Your kid can wait." Right then, her son shoved a smaller kid off the swing. She clapped. I said, "You're raising a tiny landlord and you're proud of it." She got louder. "Don't talk about my son. He's gifted." I said, "He's gifted at pushing toddlers." Then I asked, "Ma'am, do you have a husband?" She said, "Of course not." I said, "Now that makes sense." She snapped, "Mind your business. I'll have you removed." I said, "It's a public park. The only thing you can remove is that trash." She gasped. "Did you just call my son trash?" I said, "Ma'am, look behind him." Then I said, "Not your fault. People get those two confused." She screamed, "We were here first!" Then my nephew looked up and said, "No, you weren't. You just yelled the loudest." A woman screamed at me for walking on the sidewalk in front of her house. Her car was parked across the whole thing, so I stepped around it. She came out and shouted, "Get off my property!" I said, "Ma'am, this is a sidewalk." She said, "It's in front of my house. That makes it mine." I said, "By that logic, the sun's in front of your house too. Should we all stop using it?" Then I pointed at the trash bag on the curb. "That's in front of your house too. Yours?" She snapped, "That's not mine." I said, "Funny. It's the only thing out here that suits you." She got louder. "Do you know who I am?" I said, "Yeah. You're the reason this street has a group chat." She pointed at her car. "That car costs more than your whole life." I said, "Is that where all your retirement money went, ma'am?" She screamed, "I'm calling the cops." Then her neighbor opened his door and yelled, "Karen, they already came twice this month." A woman screamed at me for... I was on a bus when a woman turned around and said, "Excuse me, can you stop breathing in my direction?" I said, "Ma'am, that's not something I can turn off." She pulled her scarf over her face. "This is my personal airspace. You're contaminating it." I said, "It's a bus. The air is shared. That's how buses work." She looked me up and down. "People like you always argue. Just hold your breath until the next stop." I said, "The next stop is 11 minutes away." She said, "Then that's 11 minutes of peace for me." I said, "You're paying bus prices and asking for spaceship rules." She got louder. "I'll report you. I know people." I said, "Report me for what?" "He breathed too loud. Arrest him." "Is that what you're gonna say?" She turned to the whole bus and yelled, "Is everyone here okay with this?" A man put his headphones on. Then a little kid said, "Ma'am, you're the only one talking." I was working the register at a coffee shop when a woman walked in, held up her phone, and said, "I don't pay. I'm an influencer." I said, "Okay, and I'm the guy who needs $4. She gasped. "Do you know how much exposure I bring? I have a huge following." I said, "Exposure doesn't pay my rent. Last guy who paid me an exposure, I starved for a week." She leaned on the counter. "One post from me and this place blows up." I said, "We're a coffee shop. We don't want to blow up. We want $4. She rolled her eyes. "You're being difficult. I do this everywhere and they always say yes." I said, "Damn, so that's how you beg these days?" She pointed the phone at me. "Say sorry. I'm filming this for my followers." I said, "Great. Ask them to Venmo me the $4. She said, "That's not how it works." I said, "Neither is free coffee. I have more followers than this whole town." Then a guy waiting behind her looked up from his phone and said, "Bro, I just found her page. She has 42 followers." I was working the register at a coffee shop. A patient walked into my office and said, "Doctor, I think I have a heart assault." I said, "A what?" He said, "A heart assault. My chest hurt and I fell down." I said, "You mean a heart attack?" He said, "That's what I said. A heart assault." So I wrote it down. "Okay, any other symptoms?" He nodded. "Yeah, I've been feeling really nauseous, so I took my temperature and I had a fever of 500. I said, "Sir, at 500 degrees you would be a pizza." He said, "That explains why I'm so
Hey, you're not hurt. I'm the one here.
hot." I moved on. "Any allergies?" He said, "Yes, I'm allergic to peanut nuts and also biotics." I said, "You mean antibiotics?" He said, "I know what I said." I sighed. "Anything else?" He froze. Then he leaned in and whispered, "It's my wife." She said, "If I don't get better, she's leaving." I said, "Sir, there's nothing wrong with you." His eyes lit up. "So I'm cured?" I said, "You were never sick." He jumped up. "Doctor, you just saved my marriage." Then he ran out yelling, "Honey, he says I'm not allergic to you anymore." patient walked. I was on my break eating the lunch I packed from home when a coworker marched over and said, "You can't eat here, that's it, you're fired." I looked at my sandwich, then at her. "Fired? You still asked permission to go to the bathroom." She crossed her arms. "I've worked here 3 weeks. I basically run this place." I said, "Run this place? You're not even worth the water it takes to mop these floors." She got louder. "Eating on shift is against the rules." I said, "My break, my sandwich. The only thing you're in charge of is that little name tag." She said, "I am writing you up right now." I said, "With what? Your imagination? You don't have a pen, a title, or a reason." She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the manager to fire you." I said, "Great idea. Call the one person who can prove you can't fire anyone." She froze. A customer at the counter was trying not to laugh. Her little boy said, "Mom, is she the boss?" The customer said, "No, honey." The kid nodded. "Then she can't fire anybody. She just yells for free." I was on my break. I saw a manager screaming at a young worker for putting too much foam in a cup.
Oh, you're actually too fat.
The kid was maybe 17 and about to cry. The manager yelled, "You are useless. My dog could do this job better." So I stepped up to the counter and said, "Then why isn't your dog here? Did he quit too?" The manager turned to me. "Mind your business. Do you know how much money I make?" I said, "Judging by the shirt, not enough to iron it." He puffed up. "I run this entire store." I said, "You run it? You look like you can barely walk." The worker cracked a smile. The manager saw it and snapped, "You think this is funny? I could fire him right now." I said, "You could, and then you'd be the guy making the foam. With those hands? Rough day for the customers." He pointed at the door. "Get out of my store." I said, "Your store? The sign says the owner is Bella, and you look like a balloon about to burst after taking half the oxygen in this city." He looked down at his stomach. I said,